Welcome to the Church Answers podcast. Excited you guys have joined us here today. If you don't know this voice, my name is Jess Rayner.
They
I
know
am
your voice by now.
it's just been the past few episodes where I have kicked us off, and so it's always good to reintroduce myself, Jess Rayner, and then I am here with my dad, the voice you recognized if you've been listening to this podcast for a
That
long time.
long Alabama drawl, y'all.
Yeah, you don't have that. Not at all. I guess some people think we probably have a Southern accent, but I don't, and I don't think you have that Southern accent. But glad you guys are here. If you're listening, we're glad you're listening. If you're watching on YouTube, we're glad you're watching today. We're talking about productivity today. Uh, Something that I like. I like being productive. There's something about being efficient and getting work done in a timely manner. I love reading books. I use I don't know if you're familiar with the Getting Things Done system, the GTD system, Dad.
Mm-mm.
That's something that I really enjoy. I have a productivity software that I use for productivity. So this one's gonna be fun for me today. You're a different beast, though. You are productive in a way that most humans cannot be productive, but your system is chaotic.
It is
It's all
totally,
over the place.
and it drives people crazy. And everybody, we have some folks like your oldest brother, who has these lanes that he wants us to stay in, and I'm just all over the place. And some people just want to stay in the system, and it works. Um, if I get in a system, I'm confused.
Mm, yeah. So if you ever want to just kind of maybe just a peek behind the scenes of Church Answers a little bit, you have my dad, who's brilliant.
Thank
His
you.
mind is absolutely brilliant, but it's brilliant and it goes nonstop. And so there's always things that are happening, and then there's people like me who are not brilliant,
You are
um,
brilliant.
who
Come
need
on.
who need right who need to have structure, and we just can't bounce from thing to thing. And so I have to make sure where your productivity just comes naturally because it's who you are. My productivity comes because I force myself to be productive. Um,
And
so
and I think you are overstating me a bit, certainly overrating me a bit. I actually do have a productivity app that I use,
okay.
but it's a checklist. And I cannot stand for a checklist to go unchecked within the time I said it must be checked.
No, some of the greatest joys in my life are checking off my checklist.
Oh, I know.
It brings me so much joy. So if that's you today, and you were like, that's me. I love checking off checklists. This podcast is going to be for you. If you're on YouTube, you can see my dad holding up his very simplified checklist.
It is.
I think I saw light bulbs on that list. Hey, check it off. If you if you're the type that, hey, you do something and you go back and write it on your list just so you can check it off, today's your podcast. If you're not, but you're like, hey, it's towards the beginning of the new year, I need right to be more productive, then this podcast is for you. We're all about productivity. In fact, we're about partnering with people who are productive.
That is
And
the best segue for Cheney, because you know what? Steve Cheney is all over the place too. He's
okay.
brilliant. He's created more things. When we get into a discussion, we don't even know what the other one's saying because we're too busy talking about what's on our mind.
All right. So Steve Cheney with Cheney Associates, we talk about they are the accounting firm for the church. Highly productive people, highly efficient people, highly skilled people. And so if you're looking to find someone who can help you with your accounting, with your church accounting software, your church accounting needs, whatever you need in terms of financial help with your church, go to Cheney Associates, check them out. You're going to find that they are productive. And maybe that's it. Maybe you just listen to this podcast. You're like, that's the one thing I need to be productive on this year. You don't have to listen to the rest of the podcast. Just go to Cheney Associates. You're
Okay.
done.
And just to mention this, we did in a previous podcast. Bench.co is a accounting firm, big accounting firm that's closed their doors.
Right.
They you can't even access their website anymore, leaving a lot of people in a tough position.
Mm-hmm.
And so I told Steve Cheney, I said, Steve, we got to get this word out about Cheney and Associates, and they're ready to help any of these people who are locked out of their information right now and need some help. So if you're having problems with Benchco because of its closure, bench.co, then
Mhm.
check Cheney and Associates as well.
Yeah, absolutely. They'll help you through that transition because, as we said, they are productive as well. So we're
Yeah.
talking about 10 tips. These aren't givens. These aren't things that will absolutely help you, not a silver bullet, but 10 tips as we are towards the beginning of the new year to help you become a productive pastor or productive church leader. Wherever your position is, we can always be finding ways to be a little bit more productive. And so these are things that you and I both have done, are doing, things that are helpful to us. And so we figured, hey, let's just share those with people today. Maybe it'll help them out. So let's start off with this first one. I would say it's uh,
It's
probably the
foundational.
most important one.
It's foundational.
Yeah, that's a better way of putting it. Foundational. Our first tip is to be spiritually disciplined.
Yeah, I am about a 50 percenter. And what I mean by that is 50% of the time I start the day off with Bible reading and prayer.
Mm-hmm.
50% of the time I don't. And in that I don't, there are days that I don't do any of that. So I will confess to that. And one of the things that I wish I could just get out of my mind is when I'm in prayer, when I'm reading the Bible, I have to really focus because I'm thinking about what I have to do the rest of the day.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to pray to be focused in that because, as you said, I'm all over the place and I've got ideas. And, people who've worked best with me are those who understand that my chaotic mind is going and they don't try to put me in a system. They try to work with me. And it can be a really disadvantage to be that way if you're trying to focus on the word or focus in prayer. At least it has been for me. So I just want
Mm-hmm.
to give that admission. About
Sure.
50% of the time, I start off. Here's what has helped me. I have discovered the tool both for me, for prayer and for Bible study and for listening to sermons is I write. Uh, I
Okay.
take notes. Uh,
Yeah. You
I have,
journal.
I well, when I'm listening to you preach or your brother preach, I'm taking notes in a notebook where I'm actually writing them down. And even if I don't refer back to your sermon, I'm remembering it because I'm focused on the movement of my handwriting. I'm doing the same thing in Bible study. I have a journaling Bible. In fact, this one I hope I will get done in a year so I can give it to Canon. So my oldest grandson will have one, and God willing, how many years I live, I can leave others that, and that's helps. It's really helping me. It is really. I have to journal more praying too. I used to journal when I prayed, would actually write my prayers to God. And that just that exercise of handwriting causes me to be focused.
Right. Yeah. I mean, this is a topic that if you're a church leader, you've heard before. This tip you've heard before is that, hey, you have to put first things first, and you got to spend time with God. You can't run on empty and expect to be able to pour out. And so making sure you find that time. I think it's important too. You may think, well, how do I find that time? Think about those natural pauses in your life that you have. Those times that you are more likely to reach for your phone.
Hmm.
And think about those times that you're reaching for your phone. And if you're like trying to find a time where you can spend more time with God, replace that. If it's first thing when you wake up, how many of us reach for our phone? My
I don't do
encouragement
that
to you,
anymore. I don't do that anymore.
yeah, I'm bad at it. I'm pretty bad at it. I do have to knock out my Wordle pretty early in the morning.
Mm.
So, but
Wordle's
find those times. And so even for you, it's a simple thing is start putting your phone not next to your bed and just putting your Bible there instead. And letting it be a visual reminder of, hey, you need to be spiritual disciplined. So if your church leader, do that. For me, I read my Bible every day because it's on my checklist. So I'm gonna mark it off. But for me, where I have found my most effective time, and so I'm a pastor, and so I'm able to do this a little bit more. It's I drop my son off at the bus in the morning. I'm here in the office. It's quiet first thing in the morning. Before I open my laptop, I open my Bible, and that's the time I spend with God. I would say a large majority of the time. And so just finding that rhythm of your life that works for
right.
you
Right.
when you can meet that. Be spiritually disciplined. Our second tip, very definitely connected to being spiritual discipline. In fact, you could say this is a spiritual discipline. By the way, there's a great book out there. Spiritual Disciplines for the Christian Life. Donald Whitney, I believe, wrote
Donald,
it.
yeah,
If you're
Donald,
just wanting to learn more
Donald
about spiritual
Whitney's a
disciplines,
friend, so I'm sure he wrote it.
What's that?
He's a friend.
Okay, I'm pretty sure I got the author right. I'm pretty sure that's who it is. I can see the cover design. But the next one is talking about just praying, but praying specifically for the day ahead. Now, the implication in this is that you're praying in the morning. So, what does that mean for you in your spiritual disciplines and being disciplined and being productive as a pastor? What does it mean to pray for the day ahead?
Well, first of all, I'm assuming that you're praying in the morning. A lot of you are. So that's point number one. Number two, even if you are not, one of the first things you can do is go to your phone, which
Mm-hmm.
is don't do, and go to this app that you may have. Jess's is more sophisticated. Mine is very basic. And without the temptation to check your messages, to check your emails, look at what you have planned for the day, which is on a list. Some people will be on a calendar, and pray for that. Just 1 minute, 2 minutes, just do that. Even if you're not a first in the morning prayer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's great just to pray for God's wisdom. I
Yeah,
really do. Um, if you're a church leader, if you're a pastor, you're listening to this, the volume and the variety of decisions you have to make on a daily basis
it's enormous.
are unlike any other profession.
Oh, it's
Uh,
enormous.
and if you're a pastor, you're listening to this, you're like, yes, like the variety and volume. I mean, you can go from making a financial decision to marriage, helping people with their marriage to doing some counseling. It's just all over the place that you are doing.
You know where any toilet tissue is?
Toilet paper, um, all these decisions that you make. Pray for wisdom. Just pray for
Absolutely.
wisdom for the day ahead. God, in all those circumstances, if it's anywhere from paper products in the church to helping someone in their marriage, ask God to give you the wisdom for that. Pray for His grace. That He will give you, everything you need for the day, and then also pray for opportunities. I think to share the love of Christ, to share the hope of Jesus.
Yep.
Those are three things that I think if you could be spiritually disciplined, because it's easy to lose sight too if you're a church leader of like sharing Christ. So praying for those opportunities, and I get it when you're hearing like, oh, I don't know if I have time for all that. It's amazing when you sit there and you pray for those things, how everything else falls into place.
It is kind of amazing when we depend on His power instead of our own power. Not by strength, not by power, by your Spirit, Lord God Almighty.
But I'm talking, it is, and I'm not trying to minimize what you're saying here, but I'm also talking from a productivity standpoint.
It
A
is.
lot of pastors feel like I don't have time to do that, but it's amazing when you put that first, how much everything else begins to fall into place. And that's nothing new for me. That's nothing new. I mean, that's groundbreaking. Maybe it's just a reminder for you today if you're thinking about how do we be more productive.
Let's
One,
let's
be spiritual discipline.
no, you
Two,
finish your thought.
pray for the day ahead. Go ahead.
Let's combine two of them. I really think they should be physically disciplined and get sufficient sleep because
Okay.
they're all about being physically ready
Hmm.
for the day. I've always had a weight problem, and maybe one of these days God will give me the strength to conquer it. But I do go on the treadmill almost daily, and
Hmm.
even though the pounds coming off have been slow, I do that. But one thing I don't do is sleep. And yet I told you right before this podcast, I'm celebrating because I slept 7 hours last night without waking up. I usually do 2 or 3 hours, work 3 hours, go to sleep, or either take a nap later on during the day, and
Yep.
sometimes not at all. All of these are so incredibly important. We're just beginning to get more news about the science of sleep, the how the body is affected by sleep. We're getting deep dives into how important that is. I read one notable physician who recently said it may be the most important thing we do in our health routine is to get enough sleep. If that's the case, I should have been dead 10 years ago.
Well, we're combining two of our tips here because I know we talk about 10 tips, but we're talking about a tip of being physically disciplined, also the tip of getting sufficient sleep. It is true. You're thinking, oh, this new science is coming out. I'm going to give you a little Jesus juke. It's been in the Bible for a really long time.
I think he has a lot to say about rest.
He does. I was thinking about the book of Hebrews 4, where it talks about, God gave us rest. God commands us to rest, but also we will enter his future rest. And we get a taste of that now. And so I think too, when we're talking about rest and we're talking about being physically disciplined, I know there's a physical aspect of it as well, but there's a spiritual aspect that our physical rest helps us to find soul level rest.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of people don't think about it in that way, is that they just think, oh, if I just need more sleep. But when you're actually resting, from a spiritual standpoint, you're finding soul level rest. You're finding times just to be, and being physically exercising and getting enough sleep enhances your ability to actually just be with God and finding that soul level rest as well. So physically disciplined, find what works for you. I think so many people aspire to, hey, I'm going to go be a marathon runner. Small
No,
chunks.
I don't, Jess.
Well, they want that, and so they set out with these grandiose ideas, but the reality is they fall short. Just find something that works. For me, I wasn't a runner, but that's where I go now. Like when I my feet hit the pavement, there's just something physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually that happens. Find that thing that works for you. I honestly, I not they do it for the exercise, not for the kind of the spiritual component. But yoga, I know there are people that do that. Like it's just they do it just to kind of stop and take a break. So find what spiritually works for you, but also make sure that you're getting enough sleep along the way.
And for those of you who are about to send Jess and me cards and letters about yoga, we're not talking about a spiritual discipline. We're
Right.
talking about we're not getting into other religions. So please, we're
Yeah.
just
Well, yeah.
talking.
I was trying to give that caveat as well. That's not what I was talking about. I'm talking about just the physical exercise that goes. Stretching would be a better way of saying it. Maybe it's not yoga. Stretching, doing things like that. Yeah, but get sleep. Make sure. Again, there's more studies coming out about putting the phones away, not doing screens before you go to sleep. Like all
Mhm.
those things take away from your sleep. But so all that's going to help you be more productive. I'm guilty of that. I'm really bad at night that I'll open up my laptop and I'll say, oh, I'm just going to do one more email, 10 more minutes. And then all of a sudden it's 45 minutes, it's 60 minutes. And I'm like, oh, I just missed
And
out an
that
hour of
light
sleep.
adds more time to it because you got to get over the screen light as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So I need to do better at that as well. So physically disciplined, getting sufficient sleep. Those are our next two tips. We'll move on to our fifth tip, which is talking about sermon preparation. So kind of shifting gears here a little bit. Now we're going into about time and time management and scheduling and calendaring. Our fifth tip is making appointments for sermon preparation. Explain
Yeah.
that.
Well, it's almost self-evident. If it takes you 15 hours to prepare a sermon and you think that you can do 3 hours at a time effectively, you should have 5 3-hour slots on your calendar.
Right.
It shouldn't be something that you're just working into your schedule, because that presumes that it's not that important because you don't have calendar time set aside. But it also means you're probably not going to give yourself that, because it never works that way, because you're going to go from one item to another. One of the things that I have done well, I've confessed many of my inadequacies. One of the things I've done well, particularly in the areas of writing books, is I've always scheduled it on my calendar. Book writing time. Some people ask me how I write so many books. I say I sit down and write them.
it's a lot easier for you to do that than most people. The way you write books is not fair. It's just not.
Well,
I've seen it.
the principle is still the same, that I take time to put it on my calendar, and I'll fill up that calendar with all these slots to write.
Yeah.
Until, of course, Tyndale comes back and say, hey, can you squeeze one more in while you're at it?
Yeah.
That's happened a few times lately as well. I just say, I'll do my best.
So if you're looking for productivity in terms of sermon preparation, if you don't know how many hours you spend on a sermon, that would be your first step.
Mm-hmm.
Figure out how many hours a week you spend on a sermon. You're like, well, how do I do that? Well, you could do a simple just track your time 1 week and see how it goes. But for me, I know that I'm anywhere from 15 to 20 hours on my sermon most weeks. Sometimes I can get under 15. Some weeks I'm at 20, 25, depending on if it's a tough passage and I'm still wrestling with it. The reason I know that is because I have chunks on my calendar. I always, my Monday, I spend at least 3 hours. And the way I do it, I just pray and read over the text. Pray and read, pray and read, pray and read, and just write. Tuesday is my big day. I typically do about 8 hours on Tuesday. I don't book any appointments. If I do, it's a lunch. It's a quick lunch, just because I'll need that mental break. beyond that. And then I fill in the other hours Wednesday and Thursday.
You front load it, which I think is also a good efficiency tip too, especially when you have something that requires repetitive work week after week after week. Not repetitive in the sense that it's the same old, repetitive that you're always going to be doing it.
Yeah. And I would recommend doing, a good chunk of it in the first half of the week too, because sometimes if it's going to take longer, you're going to need those extra time later in the week. And
Or
so,
something's going to come up.
so yeah,
Oh,
so something's going to come up. And so, but Tuesdays, I told my ministry leaders, directors, everyone I work with, like, I don't meet on Tuesday because that's my big sermon prep day. I'm typically in my office, doors shut, and they know that. Like they get it, they respect it, because I'm spending. If it's a 16-hour sermon prep week, I'm spending half of my sermon prep on Tuesday,
right.
the whole day. So it works. So being productive and actually making appointments for your sermon prep. That is our fifth tip for becoming a productive pastor, which brings us to our halfway point, which means we need to thank somebody here.
Well, we absolutely love our relationship with Upward. Upward Sports has been around for quite a while. I think I've discovered it more recently in the last 2 years. I know I have, because I've seen the community impact that a sports league can have. In essence, it's bringing the sports league to your church, because that means you are reaching people in your community with that sports league, and they have all kinds of sports that they could make available. They do everything from baseball to volleyball to flag football to soccer to running, and you partner with them, and you're going to be reaching your community. They'll customize it to fit your church. Look, we're still early in 2025. If you really want to engage with families in the community, if you really want to reach people, contact Upward Sports. Just go to upward.org/church answers. Once again, that's upward.org/church answers. You'll have something that'll be fun, that'll be good exercise, but even more than that, it's so Great Commission oriented. It's the Jerusalem of the Acts 1:8 Great Commission. So love what Upward is doing. I think I'm going to be doing a webinar with them sometime in 2025 as well, and I'll be looking forward to talking about what we've learned about Upward when the time comes.
Yeah. Thank you, Upward, for partnering with us today. Love what they're doing. Excited about what they're doing. We're talking about 10 tips for becoming a productive pastor. We've covered 5 of them so far. We're talking about spiritually disciplined, praying for the day ahead, being physically disciplined, getting enough sleep, and then making appointments for sermon preparation. So we've kind of moved into a little bit more of some pragmatic things. We're going to get to some non-pragmatic things again here in just a minute. But the 6th one is to determine 1 to 3 priorities you will accomplish for the day. Dad, you wrote a book called Eating the Elephant. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. I did.
Why? What was the whole premise behind that book?
Well, the premise behind it was, if you're an established or traditional church, you cannot initiate change rapidly. You have to do it one step at a time, or to use the metaphor, how do you eat an elephant? One bite
at a time.
At a time. Same principle goes for, hey, you can't get everything done in a day.
Right.
What are you going to do? What are you going to bite of that elephant today?
Right. Yep.
One, 2 or 3 things. That's the whole premise behind it.
So if you're thinking, how do I become more productive? Well, you need to identify 1 to 3 priorities that you're going to accomplish in a given day. And that's what I do. I look at my task list and go, all the things. Okay, what do I have to get done today? Maybe think, well, how do I determine which one's a priority? Well, this goes back to a bigger picture, which we'll have a ton of time to get into, is where are you headed? Where's the church headed? What's the bigger picture for the church? And so you kind of need to start at the end and go, this is my goal, and work your way back on how to get there. That's going to dictate your priority and what you're working on that day, because those are the goals you're trying to accomplish. There's again, it's been in the business books. I've heard you talk about it. There's a difference between priority and urgency. Mm-hmm. Explain the difference between the two, and then how people can determine, like, what is something that's priority versus what's something that's an urgency.
Well, let's go to the urgency thing. If you don't get done what is urgent, you're going to have a severe lapse or dysfunction within your organization, church, whatever the case may be. Urgent means, okay, it's self-evident, it must be done now. Priority is ranking those things that you are going to do. And you do need to rank those. You do need to say this is the most important, but you also don't need to under prioritize some of the things that aren't high on the list as well. So urgency could, for me, one of my things that I remember about urgency was with your oldest brother, Sam, and he reminded me how much I had been away. And personal thing that came on my urgent list was do something with my son. Do something with my son. That, okay, Tom, that's not talking about leadership in the church. Yes, it is. It's talking about leadership anywhere. What did God say? If you cannot lead your family, then you cannot lead your church. And as Paul was writing to Timothy. And so urgency is those things where you're going to have something of a catastrophic nature. Maybe that's an overstatement, but you're going to have a severe malady take place unless you get it done then. I don't know what you were thinking about, but that's what I think about.
Well, yeah, too, but I don't think it's always severe as well. It's something that can often it can be big, but I think it's something that also can feel big. Urgent can be different to different people. So, and where I was talking about this specifically in ministry is what's urgent to you may not be urgent to someone in the church. What's urgent to someone in the church may not be urgent to you.
Fair.
And so, in church leadership, there's always going to be something that's urgent. There's
Well, there's
always
always
going to be
going to be someone who has an urgent matter.
right, and it's going to feel urgent to them. And so you have to decide: am I willing to make this my priority? Is someone else's urgency my priority? So yeah, there are things that are urgent in life. Obviously, you have big things like some family matters, things like that. That does come up, but
But
there's
you were describing urgency from the perspective of the other person in that case, though.
correct, yeah. And so you have to determine too what you're going to other people's urgencies are allowed to be your priority. That's why sitting down in a given day and going out 1 to 3 things. I have to get these done today. I think it's really important too. We're talking about productivity. Is right how long it's going to take you to do those things. And so if you have 3 things that's going to take 3 hours,
It's going to be tough to get them done.
tough to get them done. And so your priority you may choose to be priority based off time. And so if you have a task that's going to take 2 hours, another task 1 hour, another task 1 hour, then okay, maybe that's going to be, you're going to find yourself getting more productive.
Hey, back to your description. Going back to my church in St. Pete, the time that I did not take Sam to Happy McDonald's, which is what he called it,
Okay.
was I had an urgent need in the church. And it was someone who said their marriage was falling apart. I need to come over to their house right then. So it was urgent. If you don't come over, our marriage is going to fall apart. In my naivete, I yielded to the perceived urgency of the moment, went over to the house, tried to do everything I can. Within 6 months, they're divorced. So my point on this is I'm not the savior of the world, and I wasn't the savior of that marriage, but I was the father of my child.
Right.
And that's where I misplaced, and I looked at the urgency of another person and misplaced it instead of doing what I should have done.
Yeah. And that's hard too. And that takes wisdom, especially in ministry, is knowing when to let something of someone else's urgency become your priority. There are times it does need to happen, but it doesn't always need to happen. So praying for wisdom.
That was a Saturday morning too.
Yeah, it's tough. Something I often tell my church family that my family day is Saturday, and so I protect that whenever I can. So occasionally there's things that come up, and I work it out with my family. But for the most part, we do that. Well, let's look at our 7th tip for becoming a productive pastor. Again, we're talking about being strategic, being pragmatic here. I think this one's really good. Make appointments on your calendar for strategic vision.
You alluded to this earlier. I mean, you talked about the 3 types of things that you could do. One of them was for strategy. We don't think about calendaring our strategy. We calendar our tactics. We calendar our appointments that are made with us. But strategy, we need time to prayerfully ask God what the future will be for the organization, for the church that we're leading. And we may not have a specific agenda when we go into this, but we just need time to think.
Yeah,
not
to
just
dream.
To dream. Yeah, Robert Dale wrote a book called To Dream Again, and it's an old book that And I wish he had not done the sequel, which is called To Dream Again, because that's a newer book and it gets to the top. It's the old book. I think that's out of print. This or it's in another type of print. I don't know. It may be self-published, but when he wrote To Dream Again, he was just talking to pastors and church leaders. You need time to think about, okay, what is our church going to be like if you're leading a church 3 years from now? How are we going to get there? What are some of the dreams you have? How do we better reach our community? Our community is growing. What does that mean for us now? How do I lead? What type of staff might I need? Just all kinds of questions that if you don't slow down and put them as part of your strategy, you won't get them done.
Yeah. I recommend too, if you're a pastor, finding someone, I don't, again, every church is different. But if you have someone that's able to preach in your church, finding a week to replace your sermon prep time with dreaming, with visioning, with strategic focus. You may not, so you spend 15 to 20 hours. You may not spend all that doing that, but if you could spend a full day, 8 hours, 9 hours, 10 hours, just setting that aside on a week when you're not preaching, I think that's really effective. And so actually finding someone to preach so that you can have this.
Right.
And I think it's good. You know, at my church, I don't preach every single week. I give other people opportunities. I think my church likes it when I'm not in the pulpit. They like the breaks, so it's good. But it allows me to do other things that I don't normally do, and I feel the freedom to do that. So that might be a small way you can do that. Make those appointments.
Absolutely. This whole thing, number 8, laugh and have fun.
Yeah.
Um, I remember I had an incredible assistant by the name of Amy. Amy Jordan was just somebody who got me. You know, she understood I'm chaotic. It's her role to try to figure me out and make everything fit. But one time she said to me, she said, "You know what? I've heard about you in another setting, and you seem to be a lot funnier then than you are now."
Hmm.
She said, I see the humor come out, but she said, she just asked me this question. She didn't, nothing that was negative. She said, "Are you taking yourself and your work too seriously?"
Hmm.
Yep.
Wow. I didn't know this.
Yeah. I just thought about it. She said she would hear stories about me and things that I would do and escapades I would get into. And she said, you seem a little more official now. You seem a
Hmm.
little more. She said it was not in any way an insult. It was not in any way a criticism. She was asking an honest question. Have you changed personalities?
Hmm.
You know, and she was right. A book out, I think it's called The Levity Effect.
I was just thinking that book. Yeah.
The one with the teeth on the front.
Yeah, the blue one with the red teeth. Yep.
Yes. I think I got a copy of that for each of you boys. When you laugh, when you have humor, you actually get more done because you're having fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I've had to relearn that, Jess.
Yeah. Yeah, you got to be intentional about it.
Yeah.
Some people they're just natural at it, I think, but those are more rare. So how
Steve,
do you?
Steve Shifley.
Yeah. So how do you do this one?
Let's see. You need to be intentional.
But
you,
I'm saying practically, it's like for a lot of people, that's just not a switch. That it's not something you can put on a calendar. Like, hey, now it's time to go have fun. Now we're gonna have levity.
yes.
What are
Be,
some ways that you
be
can just
aware.
kind of what's that?
Be aware of those moments. Just be aware of the moments where you can. Most of the time, if we're too serious because we're not letting ourselves see some of the laughter and some of the fun that's going on around us, just be more aware. The moment she said that, I probably did turn a switch. Now, maybe I'm able to turn a switch, but the switch was off and I turned it to on and I began to see things that were more fun, more humorous, just more joy as a result. But, that
Yeah, I
usually
think for me when I think practical ways, I have a text thread with two close friends, and there are very serious things that we talk about in there. There's a lot of levity in it. It's a text thread that I have I can't wait to open. Because it's either going to be real life, they're going to go deep, it's going to be real life. We're going to talk about some things, or it's going to be the absolute just superficial. This is just designed to make you laugh. And so having those outlets, having those key people, I think there's usually one or two, three people in your life that that they get your humor, their sense of humor that you can go to and have that levity. I think it's really important. But I think as a church leader, if you're a pastor, you have to bring that levity. Doing silly stuff, I, I know with my elder team, I just make these random jokes that they roll their eyes at. They don't think it's funny or things like that. I think it's hilarious, but it at least introduces levity into the mix.
Yes.
Telling a good dad joke at your next staff meeting,
Which is
something like that.
which
Just
is a
being
nice
intentional.
moron telling a good dad joke. I watched you and your brother have a fight over the Christmas holidays. That was fun to watch. Y'all slapped each other with, what was that? Did you slap
Tortillas.
tortillas? Yeah.
Yeah.
It,
That
yeah.
was good. Yeah, we had a tortilla fight, and the first to spit out water in their mouth with after slapping each other with tortillas.
It didn't take long for either of y'all to spit out.
That's a good one. Do that one. It
Yes.
hurts a little bit more than you think. So a tortilla can land a slap.
Well, I heard the slap. I said, that hurt. And it didn't hurt me.
Have
So,
fun. Have fun. So you wouldn't be more productive. Have fun. Laugh.
right.
Read yourself a joke. Make yourself laugh before you can go make others laugh as well. Which kind of really goes into our 9th tip. It's having the right attitude. We've talked about recently having gratitude, which helps with your attitude. But having the right attitude is really important because it makes you more productive.
I love the book of Philippians. Sometimes I can't decide if Philippians is my favorite, if Acts is my favorite, if Joshua is my favorite. But Philippians has always been one of them. It's Philippians 4, rejoice in the Lord always. I'll say it again, rejoice. But it also has the mind of Christ. And it talks about being like Christ, and it describes who Christ was, that great Christological hymn. And that's a reminder. The right attitude is the right attitude of Christ. We're more joyous when we are doing for others rather than whining about what we're not getting.
Mm-hmm.
We're more joyous when we are seeking to tell people the good news of Christ rather than trying to just do something that is only for our benefit and fun at the moment. We're more joyous when we give rather than wondering why someone hasn't given us something. The list can go on, but that right attitude, hey, just go through. You can read all 4 chapters, but especially read chapters 2 and 4. 1, 2, and 4. Well, don't skip 3. Read the whole thing.
Yeah.
Read all the book of Philippians real quickly.
Yeah.
And I don't know what was happening to those 2 women who were fussing in the book of Philippians, but it was obviously an aberration, so much so that Paul had to mention that they had to get their attitude right.
Yeah. Philippians 2, 5-11 is such an amazing passage.
That's the Christological hymn.
Yeah. Make your own attitude that of Christ Jesus, and it goes into the hymn. Beautiful passage. One of my favorite passages as well. The idea too, I think, so often it's easy to lose sight of how much of God's grace that we've been given, what we deserve and what we've been given. To me, I don't do that enough. And it's such a reminder that, I deserve hell, but through Jesus Christ, I have been given the gift of salvation, and that's heaven with God forever. Sometimes just taking a moment and just sitting in that really kind of puts things in perspective. Find a good dad joke, but then go also just sit in God's grace and just marvel at it. You're thinking, well, Jess, we're talking about productivity. When you start having the right attitude, the right mindset, and you take a moment and just breathe and just marvel what God's given you, it begins to make you more productive because you're working for a different purpose.
Mm-hmm.
You're working for a different reason. And it pulls you out of the weeds, allows you to see the mountain range again. And so when you go back down the weeds, you can remember the mountain range and you can push forward because you know what's coming. Having a right attitude is absolutely productive.
I'll get off the path just a moment before we finish up. I know we got one more, but I will say this. You and Rachel have raised 3 children who have the right attitude. And I know they're kids, so we're not going to talk about the exceptions, who have the right attitudes. They have the attitude of service. They have the heart of compassion, and they're just funny. Mm-hmm. I mean, in their own way, all 3 of them are just funny. And I get more and more amazed at my oldest grandchild here, firstborn, and some of the one-liners he hits me with. I mean, I think he really enjoys sticking it to the older man, not just to the old man, but to the older man. And I absolutely love the way that their life seems to be shaped around humor and service,
Mm.
right attitude in more than one way.
Well, I appreciate that. Our family vision, mission statement, whatever you want to call it, is simply three words: joy, integrity, gospel. And so those are the three things we have it above our door. That every time we leave the house, we're reminded that live a life of joy, live a life of integrity, and live a life for the gospel. And so we try. We're not perfect, but we try. I appreciate you saying that. Well, our last tip on what it means to be productive in ministry, and I think this is probably a good summary
Hmm.
of what we talked about. Work hard, rest intentionally.
Yeah. And it's very easy for a pastor to go to an extreme either way.
Mm-hmm.
One is to be the workaholic, and a workaholic is one that is working more than he should. Just simple as that. It's not a number of hours, but working more than you should. Rest intentionally. We've talked about that, but there are some pastors who goof off, but they're not that many. And so rest intentionally, but maybe 18 holes of golf 5 days a week is a little overboard. So
Yeah.
make sure you're working hard, but you're resting intentionally as well.
Yeah. Well, hope these 10 tips today have been just helpful to you. Maybe there's just one or two that you're just walking away with going, yeah, I can implement that one. I can do that one. Hopefully there's a nugget in there that you've pulled out. We mentioned it earlier too. We want you to partner with someone who is absolutely productive. And so we mentioned earlier at the beginning of this podcast that one of our partners, highly productive, is Cheney Associates. They are what we call the accounting firm for the church. And so if you're looking to be more productive in ministry and you're looking to help your financials, have someone who can work with your financials for your church, contact Cheney Associates. They will absolutely help you with that and help you become more productive. But again, hopefully you just gathered one, two, maybe you gathered all 10. I would say it probably wouldn't be the most productive thing to try and implement all 10 of them. Pick one or two, start with that, grow in that area of your life, and then see what can happen. Any closing thoughts?
I absolutely love biblical productivity. And by
Mm.
biblical productivity is getting things done in the way God wants you to do it with the right attitude. And if we can just keep that in mind, we can have fun at what we do. We can laugh and we can have joy. And work will not feel like work. Work will feel like a blessing that God has given us.
Yeah. Go grab a tortilla, go find a good friend, take a sip of water, and slap each other and see what happens. You'll be amazed just by doing that how much more productive your life will be.
Okay, got
All
that.
right, maybe not, but you'll have fun in the process. Thank you so much for listening today. We love having you on the Church Answers podcast. We love tackling these different topics. We hope they're helpful to you. By the way, if you ever have an idea of a topic, feel free, go to YouTube right now, go down the comments, type in maybe something that you would love to hear us cover, or maybe you just have something else that you think is really productive that you do. Add that to the comments as well. We'd love for you to do that. If you're listening, thank you so much for being a part, for joining us every single time. It's a joy to be able to talk ministry, practical ministry with you guys. Thank you so much. We look forward to seeing you on the next episode.